everyone, and welcome to Insights from Elsewhere. It's a pleasure to have you here to talk about the way of insights in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and elsewhere too. My name is Cynthia Portugal, and I'm the growth director at Insight Platforms. I am from Brazil, and I live in São Paulo. Today, I'm talking to Stephanie Vincent. She's the executive vice president at the Harmon Research Group in Costa Rica, Central America. So, welcome
Hi.
to our podcast, Stephanie. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited.
Amazing. We're excited too. And she's going to talk about her experience in details and what are the challenges and opportunities in Costa Rica, but also Central America and Latin America. And she's going to talk about her previous roles as well, where she wasn't working in insights and how they shaped the way she does insights today. But let's listen straight from her. Welcome, Stephanie, and tell
Thank
me a
you.
bit about your journey into market research. How did you get here?
I started in market research when I was really young. I was fresh out of high school and, I needed a job. And I was a phone interviewer. So I started it was actually the biggest data collection company in the world by then. So it was
Wow.
huge. We had a bunch of different call centers. And the one in Costa Rica was also huge. It had about 1,800 stations or so. So it was very, very big.
Yes.
And back then I was just doing surveys on the phone. I was the one calling people all the time, like, hey, I want to ask you a few questions. Do you have a few minutes? And then after about a year, my boss promoted me and I was the assistant to the president and the VP. So I was able to see that side of the business too. And I thought it was so interesting and I loved it. I was also doing a little bit of sales here and there. But after 7 years, I wanted to, go and work at this big other company. And so I got my degree on marketing and I wanted to, like do the consumer thing and stuff. I switched to work at Mondelez and Unilever. And after 12 years, my first boss at that data collection company called me back. This was 3 years ago. And he told me if I wanted to work for him. He had started his new company. It's Harmon Research, where I work now. It's a data collection company too. And I've been there now for 3.5 years. That was a full circle moment with my ex boss and now my current boss.
That's amazing. Well, I did that too, actually, because Mike was my boss in RI London in 2003, and we started working together again at 2021. So almost 20 years later, he was my boss again.
That's great. Whenever you meet someone, you kind of like, it's such a joy to actually go back and work
Yes.
to think about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I was so excited and so happy. And we were friends this whole time. So it was like the easiest yes.
Yes, of course. But tell me, you had those experiences in VAT, Philip Morris, Mondelez, Unilever, in
Yeah.
different roles like category management and sales and even brand management. How was it and how it shaped the way you work with insights today?
Oh, well, I think it kind of like gives you a 360 kind of like view of the business and you kind of like learn what is it that people do with the information, right? So you're not just looking at data. You pretty much know what is it that these teams are like currently doing with the data, right? And so it's really important. I think for me, it was really important to get to know how the brands tell the stories and how the consumer behaves and how they are looking at all this point of information and what is it that they exactly need. So we can, as researchers, give that to the brands now. So it gives you like a very broad vision, I would say, about the whole business and like a completely new understanding. And then there's another important thing, and that's that sometimes at the very beginning in my early careers, you were like, okay, this is data. This is just numbers, data, data, data. And now you're thinking, oh gosh, like this data is actually helping people like grow. They're helping their people grow their businesses and connect with consumers. So yeah, it's a whole different vision, I think.
It's great. Yeah, I think so too. I worked a bit with marketing as well, and I think it helps a lot. Now, talking about research in Costa Rica, what is
Mhm.
unique there that
Yes.
influences the insights field?
Yes. I think the other thing I was talking about this with Kristen Luck, and then Kristen Luck is my friend, and she was telling me I love how you are the biggest Costa Rican cheerleader because I'm always trying to either make someone go to Costa Rica or move to Costa Rica. So
Amazing.
so I'll promise I'm gonna give you real data here. I'm not biased.
Yes, that's
But
amazing.
so it is a great country, but the thing is that there's a bunch of really great opportunities about Costa Rica, not only for market research, but also like for businesses. And one of them is that Costa Rica has 98% of literacy, which is one of the highest rates in
Yes.
Latin America, right? And also, Costa Rica has no army, and all of that money goes to education. And then in Costa Rica, education is mandatory and it's also free. So you end up working with really clever, smart, well prepared, and well educated bilingual professionals, right? Now, because of all of these and because of the political environment, that it's very peaceful and everything, there's no army, a lot of companies have Costa Rica as the hub for
Um,
international companies. So it's a hub for these big companies like Amazon, Intel, Mondelez, Unilever, British American Tobacco, like all kinds of big companies. And so I think it gives the Costa Rican a broader vision because we are used to dealing with the local nuances, but we're also used to working with the global expectations or
yes.
the international expectations, right? Because you deal with all kinds of regional teams. You have to deal with the headquarters in Europe or headquarters in the US. And so I think that that is a huge advantage because you have like this very talented people in a place where they have like this, like lifestyle and this like set, like mindset that makes finding this really great professionals who are starting a business here, I would say like much easier. So it's like it's I would say much easier than other countries in Latin America for sure.
Thinking about Latin America and Central America and Costa Rica, what are the challenges and opportunities for
Mhm.
research and insights? Um,
Research about doing research with Latinos. And it's some things that we've had to learn how to navigate because, for example, one of the really interesting things is that Hispanics or Latinos in Latam don't like to talk about money or their income. And so we've had to come up with really creative ways on how to categorize them and to see what is their social scale. So, for example, we ask questions like that are completely different than what is your household income because people don't like to say that and they're not very open about it. So we don't have that data. And what we do is that we ask things like, how many bulb lights are in your house? Or how many rooms do you have? Or
uh-huh.
like, how many years of education do you have? Like things like that. And then it's actually like a whole form that we have. And then with the form that we put together, we can actually predict really accurately like the social economic scale that that person has. So we have to be like really creative when it comes to
In
then
Brazil, we also use a special scale. We ask
yes,
about bathroom and cars and stuff,
exactly.
possessions instead of money
Exactly.
directly. I
Exactly.
remember it was
Possessions.
so strange when I was living in London and people would ask me, "Oh, how much you make a year?" It's so rude for us to ask this
For
directly.
us, right, right. And oh, I remember, and this is real fact. On one
Yes.
of the companies that I used to work, this was actually cause for termination. So if you talked about how much you made, with your coworkers or with other people, they could fire you. And
Yes.
so this is like a real thing, like a real big thing. And another challenge that's really interesting, it's people that's 65 plus, because the technology, like they're not very, I would not say everyone because I cannot make a generalization at all. They're not as used to dealing with technology and they don't trust you. So they don't trust you when you go and ask questions and stuff. So that's another thing that we have to be really careful when trying to make a survey with people that are 65. So that's also another like big challenge that we have when having to talk to these people too.
Wow. And what are the opportunities on the other hand?
Oh, there's so many opportunities in there. I think there's a huge opportunity in terms of Central America, for example. You know how I would say Central America is very underrepresented and it's a huge region. And actually, at the other companies that I used to work at, if you put together the whole Central America as a region, it weighs as much as big countries like Colombia. Its economy, its
Mhm.
habits, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's one of the things that I think that businesses are like kind of like missing on some of the regions that are not being either like studied or like they are not being like researched about because
Okay.
there's so many opportunities in there to make money because sales are big, because people have the power of acquisition and the socioeconomics are very different. And I think that if you really take the time to study that as a whole region, you would understand a lot of things and a lot of ways on how to speak to those consumers and how to win them. It's something that the brands and also the people in research are missing that kind of regions that are so rich.
Yes. Like looking into every country instead of grouping
Yes.
everything as Latin America.
Yes, Jesus Christ. That is so painful. I was telling you the other day that that is so painful. We also work a lot with Hispanics in the US, and one of the things that it's just painful is when a client tells us, okay, we're going to do a study for Hispanics in the US, but they have to be Mexican origin only. And we're like, because they're missing on such a huge part of the other Hispanics that live in the US. And it's just
Yeah.
like they are culturally completely different the Mexican ones, the Mexican origin ones. And so it's kind of like missing half of the pie. I just want, or not even half, like just a little piece. You're just eating a little piece instead of, like studying the whole thing. And that is one of the things that we, of course, try to recommend to the client. But sometimes, if they don't want to change, you just have to go with it. But
Yes.
yeah, it's definitely something
Annoying.
that we. Oh yes, I I'm to
So,
be positive, but yes, that's the word.
yeah. Now going into this subject because it's a funny subject. What other markets or even headquarters of big companies get wrong about the region?
All of them.
And do you have good stories to tell about something that people are getting
Yes.
wrong or something that people
Yes.
do wrong when searching and doing
Yes.
marketing and strategy?
Yes. So, as I was telling you, how Costa Rica is a hub for a lot of Latin America and then also for a lot of Central America companies. And so, we as researchers and also as people in brands, we see this happening over and over again. And it's the generalization. Generalizations where they send you a communication that it's going to be only, for example, for Mexico. And they're like, it's fine. This should work for like just cascade it
Everyone
to the
speaks
whole region.
Spanish.
Yeah. This is exactly. Everyone is the same, you know? And there's so many different cultural nuances and they're so rich. And I wish everyone would have the time. I know it's complex, right? But to understand how different everyone is in every single country, right? And the
Yeah.
socioeconomic rates are so different on everything. For example, like Costa Rica doesn't have an army, right? And all of that goes to education. But right next to us, we have Nicaragua, who has like a very complicated political environment, right? And
Yes.
we also have, for example, other rates like how Costa Rica, El Salvador, and then Panama has the smallest poverty rates, but they have a very, very big medium class, right? And then other countries such as Guatemala and Belize that have a very huge rate of poverty, and which is about like 65%, 65 to 77%. I think that's it in those two countries. And so I have to speak to them differently, right? And they have very
Yes.
different consumer habits. And so it's something that, like generalizing everything and generalizing every strategy, or not only the communication, but also the whole strategy for everyone. It's such a big mistake that we see all the time. And so is the research, when they're like, okay, it's fine. Let's just do research on this country and that's it. And this other country,
Yes.
and then we will cascade it everywhere and it should work for everyone. And that is not it at all. And I have a million funny stories, but there's one that I always think about. And I was a brand manager back then in for personal care. This was at the other end for man, and it's when this was 10 years ago or so, and
Yes.
it's when the hipster trend started. We got the communication for that for the other end, and it came from the headquarters in London. And we had no way of tropicalizing that at all. We were like, okay, we just have to toss the whole thing because like we thought, okay, no one looks like this. There's
Yes.
not even a single place where I can find clothes. Like, because we would
Oh,
sell clothes because everyone was like this like hipster kind of like, when it was starting like that. And we were like, okay, nobody wears this here. I cannot even find it on a single. And so we had to toss the whole thing and start all the communication from scratch. Like
everything.
maybe we could use the same colors, where we're like, okay, let's just use the palette. That's about it. So yeah, that's one of the funny things that people get wrong, or like they kind of like assume, and it's so different.
Yeah, it happens even in Brazil, which is huge, and we have like different
Yeah.
different cultures when you go to the northeast or south or center of Brazil. If you just research São Paulo and say, okay, this is representative, you're getting it wrong. It's totally wrong.
Right. I also have a funny story, and I just remembered
Yeah.
that it's when we went like the other way, the completely other way, when we were like really specific about doing something for a country. And so we were doing something really specific for Honduras. And you know
Okay.
how Honduras is very, very into, well, a lot of countries in Latin America are very much into football, but Honduras too. And they had just made it to the World Cup back then. And so
Okay.
we were like, okay, let's just add a little bit of like football nuances in there. So it's going to be really cool and blah, blah, blah. And so the campaign was going to be for like 4 or 5 months or something. And then the World Cup happens and they lose every match. They do horribly in
Oh,
the World Cup. Everyone was mad at every single football player there. And
oh
so,
my
and we still
God.
had the campaign going on with the whole football thing. And we were like, Jesus Christ, how did we not think about this? So that was a big fail. That was a big fail. And we went a little over it. But yeah, it's one of those things that you have to go through it to learn. So it was an interesting, interesting learning experience.
That's true. And what about technology, like research technology? What is your experience there with tools or platforms, startups,
Yes.
etc.?
I think we're seeing a lot is that people are moving. This is something really interesting, and I love this. People are moving into doing online panels and quant a lot more. And this is something that I
Wow.
find incredibly interesting and really, like, I'm really passionate about it because even when I was working there, I know they were not doing any kind of quant except for maybe Nielsen and just to have like the Nielsen share of market and that's it. But not
Yes.
to, not to research like trends or if something is on the market, if they like it, if the price is good, et cetera, et cetera. They were using qual only to do that, you know?
Wow.
And then the really interesting thing is that, believe it or not, in many places, and I did this myself. You are doing qual face to face, and you're like walking on the street trying to find the respondents. And I did this myself. I was walking on the streets trying to find them. And so it's incredibly complicated. It's expensive. It's slow. And sometimes safety can be an issue because you're walking with your laptop and if you want a representative sample, you have to go through all kinds of different neighborhoods, not just the safe ones, right? And so that's also been like a whole thing. But now that I think that we have these panels, now that we are getting much better with fraud detection and all of that, I think that clients and brands are much more open to doing this kind of quant studies because they can see all the benefits, like it's really quick, it's much cheaper, you get accurate information. And so I think that's one of the really exciting things about how like technology and how not only technology, but how the methodologies are kind of like evolving into this a lot more. So how they are like adapting to this
Yeah.
fast-paced, fast-paced environment.
What do you think is like missing from the startups and platforms for research
Mhm.
when they try to enter Costa Rica or Latin America?
The really interesting thing is that I don't think they're missing a lot because I think that could be maybe a wrong assumption because I believe that Costa Rica, Latin America, in terms, for example, of AI or technology, it's moving just as fast as the US or it's moving just as fast as Europe. It's very cool to see how everyone is adapting fast because this AI thing came like a huge wave. And to ride it, you have to get on. It's not something that I have seen people being so scared or I don't want to do it. On the other side, I did see this happening with the whole digital era. A lot of people back in the day were resisting to have e-commerce or they didn't want to have e-commerce or the big platform or, oh no, it takes so much time that. So I did see a resistance back then versus this AI wave and this like new things that are happening right now. I don't see that now. I think that people are adapting really quickly, and I believe it's of course like all the years that we've had to kind of like learn and understand that digital era is it's just as important as anything else in the
Absolutely.
business.
So how do
So
you think AI is going to change? Because you talked about like interviews and how it is already
yes.
shaping, but how do you think it's going to change the landscape of research? Do you think, for example, it's going to be easier to have information about other countries in Central America in the
Yes.
long term or
Yes.
medium?
So definitely, I think AI is pretty much changing everything, like I said. And so it's kind of like you have to get on or get out in a
Yes.
way. And to me, it's really exciting. I work at a data collection company. So the whole AI thing on how to detect fraud, to me, it's really, really exciting and really interesting. And we've had to work hand in hand with a lot of incredibly intelligent and very cool people who are trying to use AI to detect all these fraudsters. We realized that it was not enough to just have this provider helping us detect fraud, but we also had to create one ourselves. And that was really, really cool because you had to understand how is it that the whole black market of bots work. And there's a really cool interview that I always talk about that Jay from
Yes.
10K Human did about how he talked to a hacker and this hacker was telling Jay everything, like, hey, okay, you have to learn this and you have to take this course first. And then this is how you get into the surveys and this is how you are doing the fraud. Things that you have to learn from it so you can add all the AI on it so you can actually make it much more stronger and have like a much stronger or like a much more robust way of fighting fraud. So I think that's one of the things, like from my perspective as a data collection company, that I think it's definitely going to change the landscape. And I also think it's like one of the most interesting things that I have learned. And I had to like go so deep into this and understand this and how is it that they think so you can try and beat them. right? So
Yes.
that's one of the things that we as data collection like deal with more. And
A few years ago, we actually interviewed at inside platforms. Mike was doing something about fraudsters. Like, so there were a couple of interviews with people who were expert fraudsters for research. And it looked
yes,
like, yeah, watching something on the news, people with blurred faces and stuff. So
yeah,
this way of working, they're pretty much organized.
they are very organized. It's like a whole little mafia that they have there. And
Yes.
I was so like shocked when I learned all of this. And also there's a few other things that we have learned, and we had to figure this out from all the like the behavior that you see on the surveys. And we thought, okay, this is a person, like a real person that's starting the surveys, and then they're giving it to a bot farm. But this real person is the person that's trying to beat all this first and captures and like puzzles and games and stuff, and then they give it to someone. So think about how are you going to solve that problem when they give it to a bot, but it's a real person that's doing it first. So you have to come up with a lot of really creative solutions. Like, well, right now we have like this, it's called like this a tool. It's called Nobot. And so Nobot, it's kind of like catching the bots from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But then we thought, okay, what if it's not a bot? And so we added a second check. And so we thought, okay, now we're going to get the bots. Because if it's a human, then it's going to pass the no bot test. But if it gives it to a bot right after that, then like we have that second check, and that's how they get kicked out. It generates information, and you also have to move fast. And that's another thing about research. You have to move fast. This is a
Yes.
really fast-paced industry, for sure.
That's amazing. Is there anything else that you think like is really cool about AI? Even if you haven't used it, you heard about it and you're curious to use. What is like the coolest thing you expect from AI for research?
So this is something that we're using now, and we're kind of like testing, and it's something so funny now that we're talking about Latin America. And it's this probing tool where you have someone like speaking about something, and instead of just giving a bland answer, it'll probe with AI. And the really cool thing that we have found when researching for Hispanics or like people in Latin America versus other cultures is that won't shut up.
They want.
And it's when you give the chance to a Latino to speak a lot or give more information, they will not chat. And it's something that's hilarious because you get this really rich insights, but they will talk about all kinds of stuff in there, and they will talk about their aunts, family, and pets and stuff.
Wow.
And it's just hilarious. It's really, really funny because when you're trying to analyze that, of course, you're trying to pick the things that are specifically for the research, but then you're like, oh gosh, this is so Hispanic because we Latinos like to talk?
Yes, that's
So
true.
yeah,
I
yes,
can.
yeah. So yeah,
That's
that's something really funny with AI and the whole probing tool.
amazing. Well, we are getting to the end of our interview. I could talk forever because I see so many stories relating to what I see in Brazil and in the region as well. But to wrap it up, some rapid fire questions. What's your favorite research methodology and why?
Oh, I would have to say I'm biased, but I have to say online. I would have to say online quant because
Well,
it's so quick. I love that it's so quick and that you can get insights in such a short period of time.
that's great. And what's the most exciting trend in marketing research today?
I think something that's really exciting, it's how we're trying to do or how we're trying to go through qual in quant quantities. if you know what I mean. So like trying to do
They call
quality,
it
but like,
scale.
yeah, exactly. Scaling that, I think it's really, really interesting. And I think it's one of the trends that's really strong right now. There's a bunch of platforms trying to do that. Also with AI, trying to use AI for it. And I think that's really, really cool. And there's another one that I find really, that I think it's really interesting. It's also, these platforms that are, verifying your identity and who you are, trying to fight fraud. And I think that's also a trend that we have to like look carefully because I think it's coming strong for sure.
Yes, amazing. And last, what's a piece of advice for someone who is starting their career today?
Oh
Remember
gosh,
you when you were an
yes.
interviewer.
Yes, for sure. So you know how I have always studied like I find fascinating all these types of personalities, like type A, type B, the green one or the feeler, the person that only uses reason and all that. I think that here, when you come to insights, it's very, very important to have an open mind and to have a lot of adaptability and also like always be open to change and change quickly. Because if you're one of those people that don't like change, that you like things to keep things as they are and just be like, no, we've been doing this for 10 years, and so we're going to keep doing it like this, like you're not going to survive, I think. So it's one of the advices that I would give, no matter what type of personality you have, you always have to be open to change and change quickly. That's like the thing that I would tell a younger person starting here.
That's amazing. Stephanie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to
No,
you. It
thank
was
you.
wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so
you so.
much.
I am so excited that you invited me here. Really?
Well, we need to thank Ange who recommended you actually.
Yes, my dear. And I met her in IAX Amsterdam.
Yes,
And she
so
was great.
she's
She was
brilliant. She's
amazing.
brilliant. So
She's
today we
brilliant.
talked to Stephanie Vincent. She's the Executive Vice President at Harmon Research Group in Costa Rica, Central America. So she talked about how she does research, what are the opportunities in the region more than anything, and how AI is changing how they do research and understand the different countries in the region, because it's not just about Costa Rica, but the whole lot of countries there that need attention from headquarters as well. So she shared her stories of frustration with previous employers and headquarters and markets. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you all for listening to the Insights from Elsewhere podcast, another initiative from Inside Platforms. Subscribe to Inside Platforms to get news about the industry of insights every week straight into your mailbox. Thank you and see you in the next episode. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.